On this episode of Mosaic with TJ,
Then we're going to talk about it. And then daughters who were raised well can't check their mothers or even ask their mothers any questions. Oh my God, we're getting into all of it.
okay, hold up. you know, he's talked about holding your mothers accountable and checking your mothers. I think I understand what he's saying about, talking to our mothers about the things that they should have told us and didn't, or how certain decisions and choices, that they made, how it affected us. I get that. But I find it a little bit offensive to suggest that I'm going to check my mother. No. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my channel. I am TJ, and welcome to Mosaic with TJ Randolph. Um, as you come in, I'm going to ask that you like the video and subscribe to my channel. And before I get into it, I want to thank the 512 subscribers I have thus far. I appreciate you, and I am so happy that you are finding value in the content that I am delivering. Today, I'm going to do a reaction video to one of Kevin Samuel's videos. And it's interesting because it's a reaction to his reaction. And I didn't even plan to do a recording today. However, as I'm preparing to do a broadcast on Monday that also reacts to one of Kevin Samuel's videos, I was doing a little bit more research and came across this one, and thought it would be very important to kind of get a more insight into his frame of mind as it relates to mothers, because I am one. So I wanted to take this opportunity, or I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of get his perspective and react to that. So without further ado, to shout out to MTR, let's get to it.
What I want to say is shout out to all of the mothers. This is not a witch hunt. This is not a witch hunt. This is going to be a thoughtful discussion and how at some possible reasons why we are where we are today. Okay? That's what I want you guys to understand. That's the purpose.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. I appreciate the disclaimer on the front end. Um, I'll just leave it right there. I appreciate the disclaimer on the front end, but oftentimes I know for myself, when I give a disclaimer saying that I don't mean to offend you, at the beginning means that I'm probably going to offend you. So, in as much as he said it's not a witch hunt, it is probably going to come off as one, but I could be wrong. Let's see.
The purpose is not to have a witch hunt, is to discuss the possible situations of why we are where we are today. Let's see, get the likes up, guys. The likes should be over 3,000. Get them likes up, man. Get them up. Get the likes up so we can get started with the program. Get the likes up so we can get started with the program. And the question on the floor is, are modern mothers failing their daughters? And by failing may be a harsh word, and I don't think modern mothers are doing this on purpose. Matter of fact, I know they're not. I say I hope they're not. So here's the theory. It's fair to say that women born during the baby boom of 1945 have raised their daughters to become modern, independent women above all else. Now, if you're not familiar with the baby boom is the period after World War II was over when all the soldiers came back home and when babies were being born galore. That's when we had the big population rise. And that's where a lot of the movies like Soul Food, Big Mama, and Soul Food was the mother of the baby boomers. My mother's generation was baby boomers.
And that is the same as mine. My mother was born in 1949, so she is a baby boomer. Um, so I'm tracking so far.
My grandmother's generation is silent era. My generation is Generation X. It is my contention that baby boom women raise their daughters to be modern, independent women above all else, and so on and so on. Silent era women raise their daughters to be just like them. However, it is well documented that baby boomers, many of them looked at their silent generation parents as backwards, slow, stuck in a different time, and you've seen this acted out across many forms of media.
Okay, he says the silent era that is also known as the traditionalist era. And that would be my grandfather's generation. My grandfather was born in 1910. I will concede that point far as how baby boomers looked at their parents' generation. And I would say to you, it's not unlike subsequent generations have looked at the preceding generations as backwards, slow, not understanding, don't you're not getting with the times. But also, I want to submit to you, as each generation progresses, there are certain advances that came along that were commensurate with those generations to propel us forward and lended itself to the idea that the previous generation didn't know what the hell they were doing. That's just my perspective. Let's continue.
Imitation of life. Well, that may not be an accurate representation.
Mm.
Because after the baby boom, that's right around the baby boom. If you were born in 45, in 1965, you were 20 years old. At the height of the civil rights movement, in the early 60s, the sit ins, the free love generation, all these things were going on worldwide, new ideas, new ways of thinking about stuff. And many of these young adults looked at their parents as stuck in an old world that didn't exist. So they rebelled. They turned against all other traditions that had got us to where we are. So when we talk about the time of Greenwood and this and that, that's my great grandmother's generation. Shout out Mama Ora. 1921 was my grandmother was born in 1924. My grandpa was born in 1919. So their parents, Mama Ora and them, they were born, in the turn of the century. That's the greatest generation, the one that survived the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. So swing up to 1945. The war is over. People are spreading out. Segregation is ending. People are going to college. Industry is happening. It's one of the it's a boom time in America. The Europe was in rubble because of the Germans. Japan was having to rebuild. The only thing that was out there was the United States, and then the beginning of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
We were the good guys. We were the cowboy in the white hat, and we were the dominant world power, uncontested in a lot of ways. So here's where the baby boomers are born into. This is a generation of women who decided to go to college instead of becoming a domestic decided to. Oh, and another thing that happened. Let's not forget this: baby boomers had ability to go to college. They also had a couple of other things happen. The advent of the pill, birth control, meant that women, for the first time in history, could actually avoid unwanted pregnancies on a consistent basis. And then on top of that, Roe v. Wade legalized deletion. All of these things effectively freed women from the traditions and things of previous generations. They had options and choices that other women never had. But here's the thing, with choices come responsibility, and many of these women chose to choose a different kind of life. Those women are Generation X, me, they're our parents. They were the generation that told their daughters to go don't worry about no man, go get a college degree, go get a job, take care of yourself. And then they taught their sons to be nice guys, how to treat women. This was that we were that generation, baby boomers, were the generation that switched everything up.
I cannot speak for um, how young men were being raised because I'm not one. But I will say that during my mother's generation of the baby boomers, there was still some traditional values that were instilled in them from my grandfather's generation, specifically that men took care of families, that they opened doors, they were chivalrous. That is the time that you would see these, I guess, cartoons or newspaper articles or something like that, or media at the time that a man would take his jacket off and put it across a puddle so a woman could walk across it. So, and then you had not necessarily, ma'ams and no sirs, but you definitely had respect for your elders then. And so my grandfather's generation, which is the traditionalists, were still teaching those and instilling those in their children. My mother's generation, which is the baby boomers, and my mother's generation instilled that in us. But there was something else that was going on during the time that baby boomers were raising children. I'm not negating any of the things that Kevin has spoke to thus far, but there were other things that were coming into play as well. Let's continue.
Get started. Enter Generation X, me, and I think this woman she's younger than me, so she's either late Generation X, uh, or late millennial, or the last of Generation X. So Generation X was from 1965 to roughly 1980,
Hmm.
something like that. And then from 1980 to 1995, and from 1995 to 2020. So you got Generation X, Millennials, and Zennials. Let's get started. This is a this is where we're going to look and see what the results of women in baby boomer women turning against the traditions and choosing a different path have wrought. Let's get into it right now. Are you raising your daughters to be wise? Yes, I am. My daughter is on honor roll. That's a good student. The question I asked right off the bat, are you raising, if you didn't see the first part of this, I'll upload it tomorrow, but I cut to the chase. She started off saying that she believes every woman deserves to be married. That was a back and forth. The next question I asked was, are you raising your daughters to be wives? And she said, yes, I am. And the first thing out of her mouth was, I'm a PhD. She's a good student on the honor roll. That's why that sound makes so much stuff. When I asked that woman on that one broadcast, what does your husband have to say about it? What I would never, I would not choose to be married. I'm a PhD. I'm a PhD. I'm a PhD. This is where it came from. Going to college and getting a degree, women actually told their daughters that this would make you a good wife. They believed that. They believed education was going to make, now education is a definitely a good thing. Black people have always believed in education, but going to college has nothing to do with becoming nothing to do with a relationship.
I would be interested to know. He makes a good point, but I would be interested to know if the mother is a wife for her daughter to have seen what that looks like. And I've shared with you before that I did not know what that looked like because I didn't see it. So I'd be interested to know that.
Mother who says she's raising her daughters to be wives and can't even define what a wife is to a man. And this is what happened, and why is it? Well, my the Generation X, didn't stress the a man. They stressed independence. Get a job, get a degree. Don't need no man. Don't worry about no man. And this is why this is why a lot of modern women don't realize how bad it's gotten. They don't even understand what it is. So when she said, "I believe all women deserve to get married," I'll upload that video and let it go because I want to have this conversation. We're going to go a little bit long tonight, so settle in. He cooperates with him. So all the things you just ran down was a oh heck no. Raising a daughter to be a wife means you're preparing her to be in partnership with a man for a lifetime. Is that what you're saying you're doing? Mm-hmm. So what kind of talks about relationships? It's important. We rewind that so there's no break.
We have really long talks about relationships and the things that should be accepted and shouldn't be accepted, and what you should to have. What you should you kind of broke up. I couldn't. What you should what? To do as a woman to make sure that she's the wife that a man needs at the time of the next time comes.
Okay. About what age do you think that time should come?
For her, I hope it's like 30.
What about your other daughter? There you go. 30 years old. Mother who's raising her daughter. This is where that 30 thing came from. And understand when she said, "Do you have conversations about relationships?" She said, "I tell her what to expect and what should be accepted." Meaning, she tells her daughter what a man is supposed to do for her. She set expectations for a man. She doesn't define what a wife is. Not telling her, can't even say it, so you can't raise it. And then telling a young daughter what to expect from a man. And then wait till you 30. Let's get it.
She is 19, and she's on the spectrum. She likes girls.
Okay, so you want your daughter to be an old woman?
No, I want her to have her. I want her to be educated. I want her to have a college degree before she gets married.
Why?
So that she has that certificate, so that she has that knowledge.
What does a college degree have to do with a husband?
Well, maybe she'll find her husband in college.
And she's not going to graduate till 30?
And no. But if she wants...
Then why so long?
Well, because I expect for her to pursue...
Okay. No real disagreement here with what he said thus far. What I will say is this. My theory also is that many women in the baby boomers who were raising Generation Xers like myself, even if there were two-parent households, I think mothers wanted daughters to be able to support themselves in the event that they found themselves by themselves, in the event that they were married and heaven forbid the husband passed away, they were divorced, because statistics have also shown and maybe that's why the pendulum has swung. There's also data to support that when uh, husbands either passed away, they were killed in war, because we can't forget Vietnam, that, or if they were divorced, many women had no skills, had no education, did not know how to manage the money, had no control over the money. So again, even if you had two-parent households, and again, considering all those other aspects that Kevin speaks to, I think those are also, they also contributed to why mothers were giving their daughters this kind of advice. Well, whether ill-advised or not, that is a theory of mine.
Yeah, I heard that. I wanted to get a college degree because going to college and reading some books is going to prepare you to cooperate with a man for a lifetime. And you need to, and when you ask why you wanted to wait so long, because college is over by 21, 21, 22. What are those other 8, 9 years for? What you know what it's for. I know what it's for. It's to get out there and to date and have a bunch of meaningless sex. It's to run up the miles. It's to do everything that's opposite.
I'm going to disagree with that. Well, I'm going to disagree with it to an extent. Um, Most young women that, I'll say many, I can't say most. Many young women were not having meaningless sex, in as much as that what it ultimately amounted to. That was not the intent, because many women, I'll use myself as an example. I was I had sex, but it was in the confines of a relationship because I hoped it would lead down the path of marriage. It didn't. So I won't deny that some women are out there just, throwing it up. But I would submit that many seek to find their husbands in college, hope to find their husbands in college, but do not find their husbands in college. There have always been those wayward women that just have sex willy-nilly, and I will submit to you that is a deflection in and of itself, to protect their feelings from the fact that they weren't wanted. So they'll say, well, it was no big deal for me, which is a lie. Let's continue.
With their feelings. I'm not asking any groundbreaking questions. This should be basic common sense. And to think at 30 years old, your grandmother wasn't 30 when she had your mama, neither was your great grandmother. But yet, but that's what birth control did. It gave women the ability to delay or cancel pregnancy.
True.
Imagine what would happen if we Thanos snapped and we had no birth control.
Women would be barefoot and pregnant, and that's it, constantly. And that's okay if that's what some chose to do. But, barefoot and pregnant. And again, that's where the phrase came from, barefoot and pregnant, because that is what was popping off when there was no birth control pills. That's where you have the stair-stepping kids, because there was no birth control, and you have the stair-step kids, 2, 3.5. Case in point, me and my sister are a year and a half apart. So yeah, it's true.
And we wouldn't be delaying childbirth. It would happen because people aren't virgins. Number one. Number two, if we actually stopped allowing people, if you really like have moral laws, which you won't, people will get married to have sex. Now you can have sex without commitment. You can even have children without marriage and no consequence. This is where it came from. geriatric pregnancy typically starts for a woman?
My question would be, what consequence would he propose? Because my mother had me at 17. She had my sister within the confines of marriage at 19. But I guess the question would be, what consequence would he propose? Now, I will go back and say, when my mom had me in the 60s, it was shameful. And she was shunned because, again, the moral fiber of the time was that it was a disgrace to the family. So I understand that and don't necessarily disagree with that.
Man is supposed to do for you. You're supposed to go out and do all this stuff and then snap your fingers, and a man's supposed to come provide, protect, and take care of you and pay these bills and everything that you racked up. Not his responsibility, but he's supposed to take care of them because that's what a man does. And then if you got kids, he's supposed to take care of them too. And you ain't got to do nothing except just be there.
I disagree with that. I mean, I'm not going to say that there aren't some women who have that take that position, but many don't. Many know that there are certain expectations that the man is going to have. Now, the issue is they have not had a chance to practice them because they don't know. And they don't know that they didn't know. I'm one of them, and I will concede. I thought, and I put it on one of my other videos, that when I was ready, that they would be ready. But that's where the adage, practice makes perfect. I had no practice. I had no example. And also, I will say, raising my daughter primarily as a single mother, I did emphasize grades. I did emphasize conduct. I did emphasize many aspects that did not associate themselves with being a wife per se, but I thought that they would be things or activities that would facilitate good character, good facilitate integrity, um, selfless service. So I thought in some ways that would indirectly prepare her for being a wife. But again, I did not know because I wasn't one. And I did not see it actively practiced. So I went off of what I thought I knew. What I thought I knew.
Now, again, I don't believe many women think about this maliciously. I think many women, especially women who weren't married, really believed they were helping their daughters to help them become self-sufficient.
I just said that because I will tell you, and maybe this was in the works before before I and my peers got to college, because I remember several conversations that we would have in college that our Caucasian counterparts, they had many, well, they, coupled up and we used to say that they went to college for the MRS degrees. But many of us who were raised by single mothers generally, we always believed that there was not going to be anybody there to rescue us, like there was going to be somebody to rescue our Caucasian counterparts. So we believed that we had to be able to take care of ourselves because we did not believe that there would be a man there to take care of us. Why? There are various reasons for that. I know Kevin and some others in the manosphere discounts that, but I would submit, it's important to consider what was happening in the 80s and the 90s. I graduated from high school in 85, then went to the University of Oklahoma. Many of those who entered into the university the same year that I did, many of them came from single parent households. Many of them, the fathers were not there. I don't know why they weren't there, but there were a myriad of situations that were going on. We had the crack cocaine epidemic. Several members of my family, male members of my family, were affected by that. So again, if we look at just my story, the crack cocaine epidemic affected my family. We also had imprisonment rates, high imprisonment rates of our Black men. So, and then we also had, for whatever reason, marriages that didn't work. parents that weren't together, and fathers that weren't there, and sometimes mothers that weren't there too. But there are a myriad of different reasons that many of us came up with the belief that we cannot expect that a man will be there for us to take care of us. So we need to make sure that we could take care of ourselves. We did not realize the damage we would ultimately be doing to ourselves, but we were. Because again, we didn't think that we would have anybody that we could fall back and that would handle the business.
Because they knew how hard it was to be a mother when they didn't have a man. Now, we got to talk about it. How many of these women had children before the benefit of marriage? So you chose to be a single mother. Or how many women walked away from a marriage because they weren't happy? I'm not talking about women who were married, had children, and then divorced for cause, actual cause. I'm not talking about this newfangled term called irreconcilable differences. I'm talking about the very small minority of women who were married, had children in the marriage, and then divorced their husband for cause, or their husband died. That, I believe, is probably less than 10%. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, 20%. That still means 8 out of 10 women divorcing. It's because I'm not happy, this, that, irreconcilable differences. So you're choosing to take on the burdens of being a single woman out there and taking a child support, whatever form it comes in, and saying that substitute the place of a man.
Okay, this is where our agreements diverge. Because, in as much as I will agree with some of what he's saying, but what I find very interesting is that women chose to walk away. Okay, yes, many women made the decision to do so. But we don't know the reason why many did. When we consider the 60s, 70s, and maybe even, I think maybe the tide started to change far as divorce in the 80s, definitely. It wasn't that easy to get a divorce. It just wasn't. And many Black families didn't get divorced because they couldn't afford to. So if a divorce actually happened, it was, like you said, for cause. But many women just weren't walking away because they didn't want to be in a family. And again, to use my own life as an example, and my daughter attested to it. She was happy that me and her father divorced because we tried to make it work, and what we were doing was destroying our daughter. So even though we didn't divorced, didn't we even though we divorced, well, I'll put it like this. Sometimes, not all the time, sometime when there are divorces, the parents forget that they're divorcing each other, not the children. But sometimes that happens. Now, you notice I didn't say just the father, but it does happen. I'll say again, when parents divorce, they're divorcing each other. But oftentimes, whether they can't stand each other or whatever, they divorce the children, and the children end up paying. And I'll be completely transparent. I didn't divorce my husband to get the child support. It was a decent amount, but I never went to get any more. It was the same the whole time my daughter was growing up. The same. I'm not going to deny the fact that some women are for that. But I take exception to this wide paintbrush that, that's what all the women are about. We're not.
How? It wasn't stressed that it's even important.
But how do you teach? And I guess where I'm fumbling the ball, and again, I'm sure you all can tell me in the comments, how do you teach a young girl to be a wife or to be a cooperative with a man in a relationship when there is no man there. I mean, because again, I saw another one of his videos and talked about, interacting with you just men in general. Well, I always did that. And actually that was something I learned from my mother. Again, from, the bus driver to the mailman to the person who at the laundromat, I, I've never met a stranger, men or women. And I got that from my mother. I got that from my mother, not looking at what a man did far as an occupation, but looking at them as individuals. I got that from my mother. But it's more than that because I didn't see my mother, you know, in that posture as a wife. So how do you learn it? I just talked about the fact that my daughter didn't learn it from me. I thought I was showing her how to be a wife. Well, ignorantly, but thinking that, by handling business, taking care of bills, strong work ethic, the same thing that men do, I guess. But I thought that was, and I could cook. I kept a clean house, you know, but that's what I thought I was supposed to do because that's what I was taught.
Okay. Submissive. I want you guys to look at the message I just posted. R. Cole. I personally like being able to make some money because I don't like asking anybody for money. I'm going to just let that sit there. I want you guys to think of all the implications of that. What does submissive mean to you? She's so weird. So submissive.
Okay. I'm going to assume that comment was made by a woman. I understand that. I understand it a lot. And I don't know this person's story. And it may not be a good reason. I'm not offering it as an excuse, but I'm offering it as a possible reason. Coming from a single mother, a single parent household, I saw my mother endure a lot of things so she could take care of me and my sister. I also saw our fathers, and I say our fathers because, my dad and my stepdad make promises that they didn't keep. Not just once, not just twice, but many times. And so a young woman being raised by a boomer in this situation, I was I was taught not to depend on anybody because, particularly men, because the ones that were supposed to love me the most, I couldn't depend on them. And I don't care, Kevin, if you agree with it or not. That's the fact. That's the fact. And even with my own daughter, she said on the broadcast that I had no idea. How can you value a man? She didn't know how to value a man because the first man and the only man she knew didn't value her. So I'm not saying that it's right that if it's a young lady that felt that way, but I am saying I understand. I'm saying I understand because, again, if you don't expect anything, you won't be disappointed if you don't get it. Now, that's dysfunction in and of itself. Because how can you be in a committed relationship and not expect anything from your partner? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But that is the truth. And I grappled with, years. That's why when people would ask me, particularly in relationships, what did I want for my birthday or what I wanted for Christmas? I wouldn't say anything specific. I wouldn't, because I felt like if I wanted something bad enough, I would just get it for myself because I didn't want to be disappointed. Now, again, does that make sense? No. But you carry those things with you whether you realize it or not. So it was easy for me to feel like, and that I didn't need to depend on anyone because I didn't want to be let down, because again, the men that were supposed to mean the most to me and I was supposed to mean the most to them continually disappointed me. So I think that that is something to be considered. Again, not an excuse, but it is a reason, it is a contributing factor. And whether you receive it or not, I really don't care. But that is the fact, not just for me, but many. Let's continue.
To blunt the civil rights movement, the gains that were happening, black people gaining, making strides, getting rights, getting money, getting all this kind of stuff. And to blunt the civil rights movement, this has been well documented. The infiltration of black organizations. And one of the main ways they broke it is they came in with the feminist, womanist movement. And this is, go watch Miss America. This has well been documented. And then feminist, feminist movement, liberal policies, and women start joining with women against men. But the funny thing is, the non-black feminists still tended to have husbands. Let's not get too far off.
I don't disagree with that. I had an interview with my mom, um, and I posted part of that to the interview that me and my daughter did last week. That again, and this is my mom, came to the revelation and the realization that, we bought into something, and this is out of her own mouth, that the women's, she called it the women's lib movement, feminism, same thing. That it was it happened not necessarily to liberate black women, but to liberate white women. And it came around the time, again, of the civil rights movement, and it thwarted those efforts. To use Kevin's word, it blunted them, because what was happening is, with the women's lib movement, it did, because it opened up job opportunities for women, particularly black women that weren't there before. Because see, black women always worked. And my mom said we always worked. We didn't need to be liberated from our men like that, because we always worked, even if it wasn't anything but domestic work. Black women always worked, because a lot of times they wouldn't allow black men to work. So again, when during the civil rights movement, and simultaneously during the women's lib movement, when opportunities started opening up for white women, again, black women benefited from it. And we benefited from it largely because black women were seen as a less of a threat than black men would be in these new employment sectors. So again, as we're gaining momentum and going into these new areas of employment and careers, what's happening? We're separating ourselves from our men. That's what's happening. Because again, our men are still middle class, the GMs, the postal workers, the mechanics, and all that. But the women, we're going to be, legal secretaries, lawyers, doctors, teachers, all these other things going up the ladder. So it's the point there. I don't disagree with that.
How long were you married?
I was with him for 13 years and we were married 5.
Did they watch you actually cooperate with him in the household?
Yes.
All right. Women need to talk to their daughters about how to live and cooperate with a man, not what to expect the man to do for them. Women today are expecting men to do for them while they do this. Mothers become jealous of their daughters. And then we're going to talk about it. And then daughters who were raised well can't check their mothers or even ask their mothers any questions. Oh my God, we're getting into all of it.
Okay, hold up. You know, he's talked about holding your mothers accountable and checking your mothers. I think I understand what he's saying about, talking to our mothers about the things that they should have told us and didn't, or how certain decisions and choices, that they made, how it affected us. I get that. But I find it a little bit offensive to suggest that I'm going to check my mother. No. Now, what I will say is that I have had conversations with my mother, just like my daughter has had conversations with me about things that I said, things that I did, things that she saw, how it affected her. Because again, in most cases, like I've said before, most mothers, and I'm speaking as a mother, don't intentionally break our children, don't intentionally hurt our children, don't intentionally scar our children, but it doesn't mean that we don't. But I will say that most mothers do the best they can with what they know, with the resources that are available to them, even if they get it wrong. They got it wrong with the best of intentions. They got it wrong because in many cases they were ignorant, because ignorance is a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding. Because had they understood what they were doing or not doing, how it would have affected their daughters, I'm inclined to believe that they would have done differently, because I know I would have. So I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of talking to mothers about, hey, mom, I know you didn't intend to, but this is how your decision or your encouragement or your advice to me, this is how it affected me. And I'm sure you didn't mean it. But the notion of checking my mother, and even though she didn't show me what it was to be a wife, she was there when my father wasn't, when my two fathers weren't. I'm not gonna do that. Maybe y'all can do it, but I ain't doing it. Because again, good, bad, or indifferent, she was there. So again, I'm pleased to say that some people have benefited from the candid conversations that me and my daughter are having, because again, in so doing, we're having those tough conversations and she's sharing what she saw me do, how some of those things affected her. So yeah, in a way, I guess that's being accountable. But no, 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 no. Ain't no checking. What? I ain't gonna check my mother. What?
I didn't say I didn't want her to be in a relationship. I just didn't want her to seal the deal until she was older. Sounds like a good idea until the follow-up question. See what I mean? They don't think about it. So you just wanted her to get out here and run up her body count. And look at her expression. Rather have sex without commitment. The realization, oh my God, that is what's going to happen. What? If she doesn't get married and she just dates, that is what's going to happen. See, fathers know this stuff. We ask these questions. They're not doing it maliciously.
Yes, fathers, you do. You do. And we need you here. I will give you a perfect example. Kevin said that this is not a witch hunt on mothers. Well, this is not a witch hunt or a on fathers. But the fact of the matter is, just as mothers have failed in areas, fathers have also. And what I mean by that, although this is anecdotal and this is my story, I'm sure that there are those who can identify with my story. I was in a relationship with a man I loved for years. He was the first guy I dated after I had my daughter, and we dated when she started dating when she was 3. Off and on for shoot, like years. And I loved him. Wanted to be married to him, wanted to have kids by him, all that. He was the only one I ever envisioned having kids by after, giving birth to my daughter. When he finally got somebody pregnant, got somebody pregnant while we were dating, it broke my heart in such a way that I was so distraught. And my father said to me, because I was inconsolable, he said to me, I wish I was a better father to you. I wish I would have been there for you. Because maybe had I been there for you, you would have been able to make better decisions far as men are concerned, because I would have been there to teach you what to look for. He said that to me. And he apologized that he wasn't there for me. So, you know, yes, fathers are needed for that. Fathers are needed to vet these suitors. You're absolutely right. But what are we to do when they're not there?
They really think they're helping in a lot of cases. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Ladies, we're going there tonight. You're going to have to get to a point to where you can actually talk to your mother. In some cases, confront your mother, hold your mother accountable. I've said this many times. You're going to have to, black people are going to have to get to a point to where you judge your mother as harshly as you judged your father. You give your father as much grace and mercy as you gave your mother. You forgive them both and you move on.
I will agree with that. I will agree with that. You forgive them both. I will agree with that. I won't say it's been easy, because it hasn't. It hasn't. Because for whatever my mother's fault, she was always there. Always. And it's easy to well, I'll just say he makes a good point. Grace. Grace for both. Grace for my father for him not being there, and grace for my mother that although she was there, she didn't teach me the things that she should have taught me for lack of knowledge. So grace for both. I will concede that.
Let me ask you, what do you think your daughter is going to learn dating this guy is going to help her be with this guy?
Nothing, because nothing.
Thank you. So what you just said, relationship means nothing. Dating is dumb.
Right.
It's dumb. You don't need to date this guy to learn how to be with this guy. You need to be with the man and learn how to let that man flow.
Okay. Yes and no. And I do agree, aimless dating is not the way. I get it. But as a woman who did it wrong, my previous relationships did teach me how to deal with my husband. How? because the little things that I would nitpick that possibly kept me from being married, I learned but that that's not the way to go. So now I don't do those things with him. But again, that's the 54-year-old me talking. I'm not sure what the 24-year-old me would have thought about it. Okay, so I think that's all for now on that. Um, he makes some very good points. He makes some very good points, and this was relatively reserved um, for Kevin because he usually goes off, and to the point that it's fodder for more views and all that kind of stuff. So this was really good. I didn't have a lot of disagreements with it, but there are some things I firmly disagree with. I do. I do. And I think I've already spoke to those, so there's no need for me to go any further. But he makes some very good points, and I will submit that for women who are raising daughters, learn from what he's talking about, from my own story of how I was raised and even how I raised my daughter. The Bible says people perish for lack of knowledge. And, in ignorance is a lack of knowledge and understanding. So many of us have been ignorant to the fact. I don't disagree with that. So that's my piece for tonight. Y'all have a good one. Thanks for stopping by.